Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's live Ruby event called an AMA. Ask Me Anything. I'm Char Nolan, a member of the culinary instructional team. So it's very nice to see all of you on this first day of October. I cannot believe that it's the first day of October. I think September just came and went like lightning, and here we are. We've received some very good questions. Just a couple of things to discuss before we jump into the questions. First of all, today is World Vegetarian Day, and if you are a vegetarian, happy World Vegetarian to you. It can be a wonderful gateway into veganism if you then decide that you no longer want to consume dairy products or eggs. So just something to think about, but it's a nice day of awareness. And if you're on social media, you'll see a lot of promotion about it today. It's also October 1st, which is the beginning of Fire Prevention Month. And I always like to remind everyone that having even a small fire extinguisher like this one in your kitchen is a very good thing to have. You can get these at Lowe's or your local hardware store or wherever, but it's a nice safeguard to have. The good thing, if you're in the Forks Over Knives program and you cook without oil, the possibility of having a grease fire is nil, so you don't have to worry about that. But I do suggest picking one of these up and keeping it either on your kitchen counter or somewhere near your stove and oven. So we've got that taken care of. And it's also Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And we have listed for you a wonderful resource in Dr. Christy Funk, who is a plant-based surgeon whose expertise is breast cancer. She's located in Southern California. She's a dynamic, kind woman. She rides her bike to work every day and rides it back home, I believe 15 miles each way. So if you're not familiar with her work, definitely check her out on social media or go visit her website. She's a wonderful, wonderful resource for everyone. So one thing I wanted to talk about very quickly is assignments and how there are several assignments that require, and I'm speaking specifically to the mushroom assignment where you have to mince garlic. And you can imagine me minding my own business, admiring the good work that you all do, and then all of a sudden seeing a couple of tablespoons of jarred, preserved garlic, which is actually flavorless. And the other day, I saw a meme that said, yeah, nobody likes garlic because there's too much paperwork. And I kind of chuckled a little bit because when you peel garlic, you have the garlic paper as your residual. So I just wanted to say that this is a garlic peeler. It's a little rubber tube. You can get these at the dollar store. You can get them at a culinary store. You could use a very super thick rubber band or whatever. But what happens is that when you put your garlic in here and you roll this on a hard surface, all of the paper comes off and you have a beautiful, beautiful clove of garlic. This is a nice big clove of garlic. And sometimes students will tell me that it was hard to mince the garlic because garlic can be a small piece and you've got a little knife. And I say, if Rachel Ray can do it, so can you. Here is a microplane. You grate, 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 and put this directly on a plate or whatever, and then transfer it to the little cup or dish that you would use in your mise en place. And what's going to happen is that you're going to see so much more flavor in your dish, and it's going to taste so delicious and so rich and full of flavor because the person generally, from my experience, who has used the jarred um, garlic, when I get to the third photo with the finished plate that's garnished, they will say there was no flavor in the dish. And I'm going to point a finger that we all need to be using fresh garlic. And these things cost $1. Any rubber tube will do, but check them out. It's a great kitchen tool to have in your arsenal of gadgets. And I'm sure many of you, I know when I was a student at Ruby, my gadget arsenal increased exponentially. Um, And to this day, I use many, many of those things. So a little garlic speak going on. And it's also cookbook month. There really is a thing called cookbook month. And if you follow us on social media, you'll get to see what some of the instructors consider favorites. One book I did want to point out to everyone is this book called The Vegetarian Flavor Bible by Karen Page. And she and her husband, Andrew Dornberger, are food enthusiasts, critics, food writers. They do amazing work. But this book will tell you everything that you need to know about regional cuisines, spices, types of tofu, types of grains, types of rice. And I found it to be a really good enhancement to my own Rouxbe studies. And I still use this book a lot. As you can see, it's pretty tethered and tattered, but it's a very good book. And it might be something that you'd like to add to your own book collection. And let's see. I think that that's the major business for today, but get that fire extinguisher and you'll be happy that you have it on hand. It's just a nice extra bounce of security. So we have some great questions today and we're going to jump right into them. And we've got a little show and tell to sort of help things along. So this question is from Annette, who is wondering about preparing savory breakfasts and without the use of any sugar, oil, or salt. And there are lots of things to do. So I'm going to say that making a tofu scramble, and we have a wonderful recipe in Rouxbe for a tofu scramble that has peppers and onions and other things in it like that. And you can batch cook it and you can put it into little containers or put it into little baggies or whatever you like to store your food in. They freeze beautifully and you can take them out overnight into the refrigerator to let them thaw. If you use a microwave, you can microwave them and you can use them to make a breakfast sandwich. I know a lot of you like Ezekiel bread. I also want to give a shout out to this Alvarado sprouted wheat bread, which is also very good. I find that these kinds of breads, which have good intentions and are so much better for you, but they seem to taste a lot better when they have been toasted. And I read a lot of your questions this week, and it seems as though some people are in the hunt for butter, and there will never be anything to replace butter. However, sometimes on a sandwich, I suggest using hummus because it spreads beautifully and it kind of gives you that texture and added flavor that you might be looking for in a breakfast sandwich. Now, Ann Esselstyn has a wonderful recipe in the Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease Cookbook, and it is for savory oats. And what it is steel cut oats, a little bit of stock, shiitake mushrooms without the stems, tomatoes, ginger, and turmeric. And it cooks beautifully, and it is a hearty, rich, anti-inflammatory breakfast. I will say that the first time I ate it, I thought, oh my God, what is this? And I will share with you that it was Ann Esselstyn who made it. But I have to tell you that now it's like one of my favorite things. I use it as a side dish with dinner, but it's a wonderful breakfast to have. And that also is something that you can use to make in bulk and then put it into little jars or also freeze it in the refrigerator. So I also think that toast with nut butter or hummus, there's no one saying that you can't have a hummus sandwich with tomatoes for breakfast. I think that when what you're new to following a whole food plant-based, no oil, salt, or sugar diet, you might perceive it as being somewhat overwhelming and maybe with little choices. But the more that you do this, I know Fran Costigan does it. I do it. We all eat greens for breakfast. You know, a side of greens with a tofu scramble is certainly a delicious, delicious breakfast. So I would say think outside the box and forget about what that traditional breakfast that you used to make was. And I think that the more creative that you get, the more enjoyable the whole process becomes. So, Annette, I'm going to wish you very good wishes on that, and let us know how you make out. So, very good. Thank you so much for that question. Also, one last thing, leftovers. Leftovers are the perfect breakfast. I made a big pot of puglisi, excuse me, lentils the other night, and I've been enjoying them for breakfast because they're delicious and good. And I have a piece of dry toast with it, and it's yummy and delicious. And we don't have to eat Cheerios or whatever. And it's kind of interesting because these days, if you watch television and you see what's being promoted for breakfast, it kind of does make you roll your eyes once you become more aware to what is nutrient dense food and why we should all be eating it. So thank you so much. I appreciated your question very much. This is from Olivia, and she wants to know if there is a good way to make a butter, a vegan butter, without oil on Ezekiel bread. So, as I mentioned earlier, the first thing you have to do is toast it. And I find that the more that it's toasted, pardon me, the better that it tastes. So, here's what I say to people. Um, there will never be anything like butter. And it's as simple as that. And as we make changes, we embrace new ways to prepare food. So I did give you the recipe for the Rouxbe butter, which is very, very good and has some wonderful ingredients in it, including a small amount of cashews. And what I'm going to say about that recipe is that the initial recipe makes 4 cups. So rather than engage in the expense of buying all the ingredients, half the recipe and see if you like it. And then if you like it, then you know the next time you make it, you'll have much more to deal with. I'll tell you what Dr. Esselstyn does with his toast. He puts a jam or a fruit conserve on it, and that's just how he eats his toast, and that's what I do. Sometimes I will use a nut butter, and then I will roll out 2 pitted dates, and I will put those dates on the nut butter, and I will use that as something that's spreadable. But any kind of um, faux butter that is on the market that claims itself as being vegan. And by the way, many of us grew up with the word margarine, but not all margarines are vegan. So you should be careful of that if you are using those in your diet. I'm going to say this: just don't do it, and make that butter that is in on our website, and try some nut butters. And I also wanted to just show you that this is a great nut butter, and it's become a family favorite. This one is unsalted, super chunky. It's by Teddy's. Teddy's is a family-owned nut butter company in Worcester, Massachusetts, and it comes in a glass jar, unless you buy it at one of the big box stores where it comes in a plastic jar, which I kind of don't like. And this is an old school butter knife, and you can see the little holes in it. And I use this to churn the peanut butter so that it becomes creamy and delicious. And just to kind of go down the road, a tablespoon of an ersatz butter, like, I don't know, think of a brand, uh, has no nutrients in it, so to speak. Compare it to the same amount of calories and I believe the same amount of fat grams, which is 9. Is this thing is packed with all kinds of vitamins, and it's got 8 grams of protein in it. So for people who come up to you because they're worried about your protein consumption when you're a vegan and say, oh my God, but where do you get your protein? A tablespoon of this will do the trick. Actually, 2 tablespoons. So lucky you on that one. So Teddy's has a great peanut butter, unsalted, chunky, comes smooth, and they have one that has flax in it. The one that has flax in it, I believe, has salt in it, but uh, it's a great peanut butter. So that would be my suggestion. Try the butter and then look at some other nut butters, or my other favorite, which is hummus. I often say that hummus is the new mayo, but it's also the new butter. So there you have it. And toasting that bread will also be another good trick for you. Oh, this is from the lovely chef Fran Costigan. We had dinner together the other night. One of our really good friends owned a beautiful, beautiful plant-based restaurant, and it was closing, and we went for the final service on Friday night, and it was just so much fun. So Fran's question is about pumpkin spice. So I'm somebody who likes cinnamon. I love cloves. I love ginger. I love nutmeg. I love allspice. So of course I love pumpkin spice. Unfortunately, most of the pumpkin spice that we see on the market is infiltrated with all kinds of preservatives and sugars and other things. So I'm not the person who is at a fancy coffee shop asking for a pumpkin spice latte. But in the morning, if I make coffee here at my house, I will put some pumpkin spice into the coffee basket, and when the coffee filters through, it has a nice flavor like that. But if we take that question to the other side of town, pumpkin pie is my favorite kind of pie. And yes, you can make a beautiful, delicious, plant based pumpkin pie that will be the most delicious thing in the world. And I'm sure that as we get closer to the holidays, Chef Fran will be happy to share her recipe. But thumbs up to pumpkin spice latte. Our next question is from Marie. Maria, sorry about that, Maria. What are my thoughts on the creamy machine? So, for those of you who don't know what a creamy machine is, a creamy machine is a single use um, small kitchen appliance that you mix things up to make an ice cream, and then you put a pint in your freezer overnight. And then when you take it out of the freezer, you stick it in this machine, and it creates something like the texture of a blizzard, if you used to go to a place like Dairy Queen or whatever. So my thoughts about them are, I have had desserts from Creamy, and they really are delicious. One of the questions that I'm asking myself now is, do I need it or do I want it? So I certainly don't need a creamy machine because I have a Vitamix and I have a Yonana, which I'll show you in a second. Um, they can range up to almost $300. So a couple of months ago, I really wanted a creamy machine because I wanted to make creamy ice cream, and a friend of mine was willing to sell me hers used for $100. She had used it once, and my husband, my wise husband, said to me, I don't think you really have room for anything else in this kitchen. And he was right. So if you want to treat yourself to a creamy machine, I say absolutely treat yourself. I'm going to show you, this is a 15-year-old Yonana machine. And this will extrude frozen fruit, and it makes it sort of like a almost Carvel like texture. Um, a lot of people will use bananas. That's why it's called Yonanas. But I use bananas. I use frozen baked sweet potatoes, which render a beautiful, beautiful creaminess. I will use frozen fruit that is lightly thawed, and add strawberries, blueberries, mangoes, etc., etc. It makes a wonderful, wonderful dessert. It's very easy to clean, and the machine is $39.99. And I've had this thing for 15 years, and I think I've taken it just about to every single class I have ever taught in my life, because desserts are really, really difficult for some people to change because they've been used to prepackaged goods or cakes or whatever. And when you look at a pint of ice cream that might have 800 to 1,000 calories, not to mention fat and sugar and other things, this is a wonderful, wonderful alternative. They used to sell them at Wegmans for those of you who live in this part of the country, but I haven't seen one at Wegmans lately. So um, it's up to you. And if you do get the machine, I want to see pictures of your beautiful desserts, because I've seen people make, ice cream pies and all kinds of wonderful things. So good luck to you on that. It sounds like a fun thing to have. And thanks for that good question. So the next question is asking about making pancakes. So first, I'm going to say that this morning I made these. Here's a little heart-shaped waffle, which I think looks delicious. And I made a couple of buckwheat pancakes, and I'm just going to tear this in half so that you can see what the texture is like. I mean, it looks like a normal pancake. So what I used was I used this Arrowhead Mills pancake and waffle mix. And the reason why is because I can make my own from scratch. But when I started out on being whole food, plant based, no oil, I needed a little help and a little crutch from products like this, which are made back 15 years ago when I first began following this lifestyle. It was very hard to find anything. So I'm going to read to you what the ingredients are. The first ingredient is 2/3 of a cup of this mix. And I halved the recipe because I didn't want to have extra left over. And actually, this is going to be my lunch today. So the next ingredient is 1 egg beaten or egg substitute. So I used flaxseed meal. There you go. And I used 1 tablespoon of flaxseed meal to 3 tablespoons of water. I stirred it. And after about 3 to 5 minutes, it sort of gets a congealed texture to it. And I added that to the mixture. It calls for 2 teaspoons of honey. Plant-based people don't eat honey. Many plant-based people don't eat honey. Vegans especially don't eat honey because it's an animal product. So instead of that, I used maple syrup. But if you wanted to, you could also use, here we go, date syrup. And I'm going to say that date syrup is a great alternative for honey during Rosh Hashanah. So there's just something else to think about. And then it called for 2/3 of a cup of milk or water. And so what I did is I made a diluted almond milk. So it was 1/4 of a cup of water and 1/4 of a cup of milk. I mixed it up. I let it sit for about 3 to 4 minutes. And then I made these beautiful, beautiful pancakes. You could, if you wanted to, I forgot to tell you that there's 2 teaspoons of oil. When something is such a small quantity like that, I just forget about it. Like, oh, it's something I forgot to put into a recipe. However, you could use 2 teaspoons of silken tofu, 2 teaspoons of applesauce, 2 teaspoons of banana, anything that is on that list of fat equals that are plant-based. So my other thing to say is, Pauline, is that if you have a favorite recipe that you have been following for years and years, when it calls for a liquid, you can either add your favorite plant milk or dilute it. When it calls for oil, you can add those substitutes. If it calls for a sweetener, you can add maple syrup or I'm not a fan of agave, but you can add agave or date syrup or whatever. And it's all about, you know, I always say that cooking plant-based can almost be like science in the kitchen. Sometimes you have to experiment and do what feels right for you and then have that, yippee yaha moment when, eureka, you have made the perfect pancake. So I think the first time that you make something, um, do everything the way that it's called in a recipe. And then after time, you kind of like add your own little spin to it and it comes out just the way that you like it. I follow this mother and daughter who make really, really awful food, but they're two really nice people and I enjoy their personalities. And the woman is from Staten Island and she always says, this is the way we like it. This is how we make it. And I think, you know what, that's a really good thing to say because I have a friend who's a cookbook author who will see food that people make and she'll be like, that's not what it's supposed to look like. It's supposed to look like however you want it to look. So that's my recommendation for the pancakes. And you're probably wondering what kind of pan I used. So I use the caraway pan, which is sort of the rage right now, and I used no oil whatsoever. I do think that in order for the pancakes to work in a regular pan, that you kind of need to have something that may have a ceramic coating to it or something, and that's what I used to make the pancakes this morning. So I think I think I'm going to wish you well. I want to hear how all of this works out for you because I have to say that a lot of the baking that I do uh, is, if you've ever read the Engine 2 diet book, Rip has a recipe for Mighty Muffins. And a lot of things that I make are called cousin of the Mighty Muffin. And I did want to say one other thing. If you are, this goes back to the question about savory breakfast. If you are a muffin maker and you make a savory muffin like a corn salsa muffin, you can put those into your waffle iron and smash them, and they come out and make a beautiful, crispy, flat muffin that tastes absolutely delicious. So there are never ending things to do in the plant based world when you are cooking. So, uh, Pauline, that was a great question, and I hope that I was able to give you some insight and helpful answers to that. This is from Annette asking about the depth of the kitchen counter. We just had our kitchen redone a year and a half ago, and I believe that our counters are 28 inches deep. But I would say that if you are going to have your kitchen redone, or you're looking for new countertops, the person who is going to help you design the kitchen would probably know what's best for you. But I believe that that is the standard in inches in America. So I hope that is helpful to you. This next question is from Jimmy, and we're going to send Jimmy's question to Chef Eric because it is about how to cook a duck, and that's something that excuse me, uh, I just made up a new word. Chef Eric knows a lot about that type of cuisine, so look for a straight answer from Eric. Jimmy, thank you so much for that question. I appreciated it. This is from Rosie A. Good afternoon, Rosie A. How are you today? Um, she's still having some challenging times roasting potatoes, sweet potatoes especially. And she's looking to make really good oven fries. So we're going to go back to a couple of things. The first thing is oven fries like a really high oven temp, somewhere between 425 and 430 degrees Fahrenheit. So you might want to check the accuracy of your oven by getting an oven thermometer to make sure that your LCD readout measures the actual temperature inside the oven. That's the A part. The B part is pan placement is everything. So your smaller strips will go in the center of the pan, and as you branch out on your rectangular sheet pan, the larger pieces go around the bigger pieces in the corner. This way, they will all cook at the same time at the same temperature. None will be hard, and some will none. They'll all be the same exact texture. So pan placement, oven placement. I like to use a middle rack, and sweet potatoes have a little bit less moisture in them than white potatoes do. So I'm not sure what your oven temp is. My other suggestion is, and I often do this to myself sometimes, is I will bake them initially in the oven and then take them out and throw them in the air fryer for about 5 minutes at 425 degrees. But the other thing I like to remind people is that if 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 you're a person, if someone is a person who has enjoyed a French fry that has been coated in cornstarch and then deep fried, it's going to be hard to develop a new norm. So I make oven fries all the time without oil, and check your oven, keep your cuts straight, and I think you're going to be good to go with that. So let me know how you make out, uh, because I think that we all want to have really delicious potatoes. I don't have a photo here, but I can put it on social media. You also, when your potatoes come out of the oven, um, go back one last time. You don't want your potatoes to touch when they're cooking, because when they touch, they will steam rather than roast or oven fry. And when they come out of the oven, you sort of want to plate them like you would Jenga. So it would be two on the bottom, two this way, two more, two more. So this way they have a chance to aerate and not get soggy, because when steam is released from the cooked potatoes and they touch again, they will get soggy. So I'm going to put a picture up today on our Instagram at Ruby Plants, so that you can see this technique for plating potatoes when they've come out of the oven. But great question, uh, a question we hear a lot from people, and just keep going. I think it's a great question. Thank you so much, Rosie. I appreciate it. So this is from Denise, and Denise has a question about using chickpeas in a can, and whether or not she can use the aquafaba that is in the can, or does she have to drain them? So here's the thing. If you are on a low sodium diet, my strong recommendation would be to drain the potatoes, drain the garbanzo beans, and then rinse them off in a warm or tepid water, because when you do that, you will remove 37.5% of the surface sodium on the garbanzo beans. However, if you do not have any issues with your sodium intake and you are looking for a little added flavor, by all means throw in the aquafaba. It'll also help the texture of the soup a little bit. Um, yeah, I think that is a good recommendation. And to that point, uh, I'm sure many of you are aware that earlier this year, the World Health Organization is looking at a number of 1,500 milligrams of sodium consumption per day per person. So if you're somebody who does need to cut back on their sodium, that 1,500 number um, is a good way to go. Years ago, um, physicians would write prescriptions for a 2-gram sodium diet, thinking that that was low sodium, but it came out to be about 2,200 milligrams of sodium. So it was way over that norm. But that's a really good question, and I'm sure that your soup tastes absolutely delicious. Thank you so much for that question. I appreciate it. This is from Marie T. And how do you get depth of flavor without using salt and oil? I am no stranger to herbs and spices, and I have a good spice pantry, if I must say so myself. I love it. That's great. Um, are there other things that you can use? Well, um, if you go back to the lemon assignment, where you have to measure the flavors and the tartness and the sourness and the reactions that you have, on your tongue, your receptors for salt and citrus are in the same place. So this is why a lot of plant-based chefs who cook without salt will suggest to layer the flavors at the end with some freshly squeezed lemon or lime juice to help elevate the flavor. For example, in the cabbage soup recipe, at the end you layer it with mustard, which has vinegar in it. You use apple cider vinegar, and at the end that helps to bring all of the flavors together. If you're not opposed to adding any extra sodium to your diet, I would suggest to use either a low sodium tamari or a Bragg's amino acid to elevate the flavors just a little bit. So I would love to see your spice drawer, because I think spices are so fascinating, and I hope that you all tuned in. And if you haven't tuned in, you've got to go to the replay of Fran Costigan's um, live event from 2 weeks ago with the co-founder of Burlap and Barrel Spices, which was absolutely fascinating and so good to hear. So thanks for that great question. I appreciated it. I'm just gonna say one last thing about flavors. Um, if you have a fresh herb garden that might have fresh oregano, rosemary, basil, or whatever, sometimes adding a garnish of a fresh herb really does uh, lend a lot of flavor. And I don't have any spearmint leaves with me today or any basil, but if you clap the leaf of the spearmint leaf or the anything that you're using, it will naturally reduce. Um, uh, what's the word I want to use? Not reduce. It will lend out some of the natural flavors that are in that. So you'll get the oils from that herb, which will then also add, release is the word, that will add more flavor. So those are my recommendations for you. And I have to say, the Vegetarian Flavor Bible has really good explanations about what spices to use for what type of cuisine. And I think that Fran talked about this last week at her event, is when I buy spices, I take a Sharpie marker and I write the date on them so that they don't get too old. Now, my spices go pretty quickly, but I think that's just another good thing to remember, to remember that you're using the freshest, even dried herbs possible. So very good question. This question is from Karen. How do I combine whole food plant-based foods with a low fiber diet due to recent diagnosis of Crohn's disease? So I think that that is a perfect question for a registered dietitian or perhaps your provider, um, because when you look at the pillars of a whole food plant based diet, it's largely built on fiber. Um, I do know that, roughly speaking, everyone should consume a minimum of 30 grams of fiber a day. So I don't know what kind of fiber numbers you're looking at, but that might be something for you to give thought to. I'm sorry that I can't answer that question, but I think perhaps seeing an RD would be a good way to go. So thank you for the question. I appreciate it. Okay, this is from Kathy. Oh, Kathy has a double crown. She completed Forks Over Nice and Essential Vegan Desserts, and she's in the Plant Pro course. So soon she'll be a trifecta of Ruby. When I have completed this class, is it appropriate to refer to myself as a plant-based chef? I think, Kathy, that you can refer to yourself however you wish. Um, I think that you certainly have the credentials. Ruby is certified by many fine organizations of professional chefs. So I think that that is something for you to think about, but I would call you a chef. Yes, I would. Did you go to a 4-year culinary school? No. Did you work the line? These can be questions for me as well. I would suggest that when you do finish, if you can find somewhere to either work so that you get to see what it's like behind the scenes, and you have a better understanding of how the back of the house works so that you have that experience behind you. I always find that to be helpful. And I shared with many of you that when I finished Ruby, that's exactly what I did so that I would gain. It was sort of like an apprenticeship. And I knew, theory wise, I knew so much of what is required, but hanging out in well, not hanging out, actually working and doing dinners in the kitchen of a small plant-based restaurant was really a helpful tool. So those would be my suggestions, but to me, you would be a chef. And let's see, you've got the Ruby recipe for butter. You've got a Ruby recipe for pancakes. And remember that if it says oil, you can either use the, oh my goodness, I forgot ingredient, or you can use one of the fat substitutes. But I didn't use any oil in these, and they feel fine to me. They were beautiful when they came out of the pan. They were really beautiful. Patrick has listed the website for Yonanas, and as well, he has listed the website for Dr. Christy Funk, who you'll probably see on a lot of talk shows this coming month. So, with that said, I'm just trying to make. Okay, let's see. Oh, here we go. We have a few more questions. I'm asked, I'm being asked to sign in that I'm to prove that I'm out. Anne-Marie, I don't know. As long as you're here, I think you're good. Um, uh, Patrick also listed the tofu scramble recipe, which I think is one of the better ones. I happen to, the first time I had tofu scramble, I wasn't sure if it was something that I would like, but you can give it Latin flavors, you can give it French flavors, you can give it Italian flavors, you can give it Indian flavors. So it becomes a very versatile thing. This is from Josbeth. Hi, she says. What is the proper way to store, freeze leftover raw whole egg yolk, and egg whites? Thank you. Unfortunately, I'm not an egg user and I can't answer that question, but we will put it into the stream and one of our other chef instructors can answer that question for you. I can tell you how to make a flax egg if you want to know, but I'm not good with eggs, so thank you for that. When the certification program is over, will we have access to weekly online Q&A? This is from Sue, I believe so. We love seeing alumni. And also, as uh, or even current students, don't forget to follow us on Facebook. We have a group for um, Pro Cook. We have plant-based, and we have forks over knives. So there's interaction that goes on there, and we certainly enjoy hearing from everyone. And there's a nice little network that goes on, and people converse with one another. Um, Hi, Ingrid. Ingrid has a question of that she still struggles with ingredient management. It's difficult at home. You make a recipe and there are always left ingredients, but then you put another recipe with this, and I see. So what you're saying is that you have two assignments that have two different sets of ingredients, and then you have ingredients left over. And so, what I like to do is either get a small container or a freezer bag, label it, and keep it in the freezer or the refrigerator until you're going to use it again. And don't forget to always date it. So if you keep it in the freezer, you have about 3 to 4 months to be able to use it again. Or just get inventive in your own kitchen and say, oh, I'm going to make this tonight. Or what would happen if I added this to my pasta sauce or whatever. So I do remember as a student that was a difficult thing. And what I used to do is I would go through a unit and then I would see which recipes were sort of like cousins that shared the majority of ingredients, and then I would make those recipes back to back. So they may have been a little bit out of sequence, but I still stayed in the unit, and I got to make all of the recipes that I needed. So that might be something else for you to think about. But yeah, that is a real thing that does happen. So very good question, though. Another question from Ingrid: is it true that when you cook beans in water with salt, they get hardened? I guess is because reason. Um, I don't know because I don't use salt when I cook beans. I will tell you what I have been doing, and my beans have been coming out beautifully, especially when I'm making hummus. I soak them for 18 hours. I'll soak a pound of garbanzo beans for 18 hours in nothing but water, and I might add some bay leaves so that they have a little bit of flavor to them. And then once I boil them till they're done, I drain them and rinse them and put them on a cookie sheet, or sheet pan, I should say. And then I sprinkle about a tablespoon of baking soda all over them. And I cook them for about 10 to 15 minutes. And there's no salt anywhere in this recipe. And then what happens is that I can either use them in a salad, but if I make them into a hummus, the hummus comes out like fluffy, 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 and it doesn't have that coarse or grittiness to it that hummus can sometimes have. So I have not seen beans get hard without using salt. And I don't actually know the answer specifically, but I can tell you what I do in my kitchen here. Huh. Another one from Ingrid. Ingrid wants to know what kind of tofu to use. There's firm, extra firm, etc. So tofu can be tricky, and the silken tofus I like to use for desserts, for making puddings, or for making an icing for a cake or something like that. If I'm making, let's say, tofu kebabs, I like a really extra firm tofu. And before I will use it, I will rinse the brine off of it. And then I will wrap it in a kitchen towel or cloth and put it in the refrigerator in a bowl for about an hour or so that more of the liquid is expunged, because I like a really tough tofu, so to speak. So, um, usually, if you're following a recipe, the recipe will tell you what kind of tofu to use. If you're out on your own and you're wondering what to do, depends what you're going to make. For example, if I were going to make a breakfast scramble, I would not use an extra firm tofu. I might use a firm just to add a little body to it. I'm just gonna, let's see, what time is it? We have a couple of minutes. I want to tell you a funny story. Um, Dr. Esselstyn was going to speak at a hotel in Scranton, Pennsylvania. If you were a fan of The Office, it's where The Office was supposedly located. And he was doing a big dinner with a medical school. And Mrs. Ann called and asked me if I could go and could I shadow the chef to make sure that he was doing everything right. And there's a famous quote that Anne will use, that if you use the wrong tofu, that dessert is going to look terrible. I won't tell you what, it'll look like kitty litter, is what she says. So there I was in the kitchen with the chef, and he was an omni chef, and he didn't really have a grasp on the basics of plant-based cuisine. So he showed me this chocolate pudding that he had made, and it was gritty and heavy and not good at all. But I didn't want to offend him, and I said to him, "Hey, is there a Wegmans anywhere near here?" And when you shop a big store like a Wegmans or a Publix or wherever, essentially they have the same planogram for every store in the world. If you know where the silken tofu is in the King of Prussia store, you're going to know where it is in Scranton, PA. So I went to the Wegmans and I bought many bricks of the silken tofu. And I said to the chef, I think let's just try and see how this will work with the silken tofu. I think you're going to see a really big difference. And he was kind of about the whole thing. But in the end, he got to see the difference of what using the right tofu meant. And he was ever grateful and very appreciative. And it's just kind of funny how having that awareness about what tofu to use can really make a very big difference, whether you're making a dessert or a savory dish. So that is a very good question. Ingrid, you're on a roll today. I love it. Ingrid's next question is, which dish will you recommend for a dinner for some guests that are not plant-based dishes? So I would do a couple. I would make a plant-based lasagna, and you can either use the tofu ricotta recipe that we have in our curriculum, or you could use, in the Engine 2 book, they talk about, they use sweet potatoes and then they mash them up, and they're cooked sweet potatoes, mash them up, and then season them like you would a ricotta as well. So a lasagna, it's got lots of vegetables. Everybody loves red food. It's beautiful, it's tasty. A beautiful, gigantic, and beautiful salad that has lots of greens and herbs. And I've been making a salad this week from the Bryant Terry cookbook called Green Slaw, which has slivered pea pods and broccoli and all kinds of wonderful things. So make a salad exciting, because for many people, a salad is lettuce and tomato with some ranch dressing or something. So our chapter on no oil dressings is excellent. There are about 8 recipes that you can choose from. And then for a side dish, I think I would probably make some a roasted vegetable, something like cauliflower, and put that seed mix on it, and everyone will love it. And of course, a dessert. And a dessert doesn't have to be, something um, that you haven't quite mastered to make, but a beautiful fruit salad or some muffins or something like that. I think that people are, oh, when I go to a potluck and I come in with my food. My food is always the first food that's gone. So I think that people's curiosity is at a peak right now, and that everybody wants to taste some really, really good plant-based food. And Ingrid, I think you've got it in you. So if anybody else has some suggestions about what they would make, um, oh, I do love our sautéed mushrooms, and they make a really good side dish as well, or even served on top of pasta. They're very, very good. So listen, follow us at Ruby Plants on Instagram. I'll post a picture of the potatoes. Make sure you get a fire extinguisher. Thank you so much for all of the wonderful, wonderful questions. And I'll see you next week. Remember that it's cookbook month, and next week in the evening, I'll be hosting a book signing in Wayne, Pennsylvania that will feature 5 fabulous authors in from Philadelphia who are members of Les Dames d'Escoffier, of which Chef Fran is the membership chairperson, and she's one of the featured authors. So if you are around Wayne, PA, come and say hello. And we're going to be posting some stuff on Facebook to find out what your favorite cookbook is. So, signing out from the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection, I'm Char Nolan, wishing you the best day ever. Bye now.